CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program, and related DFARS requirements can apply to foreign suppliers participating in the U.S. defense supply chain. Really, this all comes down to a specific set of clauses in what we call DFARS, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplemental, 252.204-7012. You'll often hear us just call that the 7012 clause. So, for example, if a Taiwanese supplier had a subcontract for, say, a gimbal or a blade on it, or any kind of drone part, and that supplier receives covered defense information to build that drone part, like the entire plan that you need to build towards, or some kind of engineering drawing, that kind of information can be controlled. That might be the property of the United States government or the property of your prime contractor and is controlled data. So when you're trying to find out of, does CMMC happen to me? Really what you need to be asking for is, do I have a contract with the 7012 clause in that? Because the actual responsibility to do CMMC, those are in different clauses. The 7012 clause has been in contracts for years. And what that says is that you will protect CUI using NIST SP 800-171. And it gives you requirements about incident response reporting when you have an incident that involves your controlled and classified information. So really, if you have contracts with the 7012 clause in them now, you are supposed to have a system security plan and be grading yourself against NIST SP 800-171A right now. You don't need a perfect score. That was something that came through CMMC, but you do need to have a system security plan. You need to be continuously monitoring the items that are in your security plan and mitigating those that aren't met yet. And you should be having evidence that you are going through that process. That would then keep you in compliance with those clauses. So there are many different clauses that could impact a company, whether they're in the United States or whether they are in the supply chain around the globe. So it's helpful to understand what are the obligations of your company. First, there's the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. And that's for now, for your defense contractors, the one that impacts you is 52.240-93, and that used to be 52.204-21. And this is where CMMC gets that idea of level 1 from. This is what establishes how you protect federal contract information. Under a proposed rule right now, that might become covered federal information, but right now it is a federal contract information, and that's the baseline if you're just going to be in the supply chain with the United States government. And there's 15 basic requirements you have to meet, and those get met through 17 of the controls in NIST SP 800-171. That's level 1 of CMMC. And that is what you have to do, any company has to do, if they want to do business with the US government. And that's how the difference works between FAR and DFARS. FAR is the Federal Acquisition Regulation. DFARS is the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplemental. It's the extra stuff you do if you want to be in the defense supply chain. Then there's DFARS 252.204-7012, and that's what sets the standard to protect sensitive data, controlled unclassified information. And your job as a contractor is to protect the confidentiality of that CUI. CUI is not impacted by the other parts of the CIA triad, the integrity and the availability. The government just wants their data protected. So that's why CMMC isn't a cybersecurity program designed to protect your company. It is designed to ensure that you are doing your requirements to meet 7012. And that is done through NIST SP 800-171, which involves 110 security requirements. And each of those security requirements has some assessment objectives. And there's 320 of those totally. So if you are going to hold controlled unclassified information, you need to have a system security plan that details your controls for meeting those 320 requirements. Now, there's also DFARS 252.204-7997 or 7997, and that used to be the -7020 rule. And that's what gives the Department of Defense the right and the authority to do any kind of medium or high assessment from DIBCAC against NIST SP 800-171. So right now, if you have a 7012 clause in any of your contract, DIBCAC could come knocking on your door and around the globe and check and see if you meet the requirements of NIST SP 800-171. And it's a little less forgiving. They don't have 180-day grace periods. You need to have your evidence within just days. So while DIBCAC assessments won't hit every single company, they can choose, and companies that are in the drone supply chain might be like the kind of companies the government wants to protect. They can choose to visit those companies and to give them a medium or high assessment. And the last clause, DFARS 252.204-7021, that's what requires the applicable CMMC assessment certifications. Whether that's a level 2 self-assessment or a level 2 C3PO assessment, but it also includes the importance of or the requirements to do an affirmation annually, saying, yep, you're still following your program. So it affirms that you meet NIST 800-171. You got to remember, that's all CMMC is doing. It is the rubric that is grading your homework. Your homework is to write a system security plan and protect the confidentiality of controlled unclassified information. So how do you get started with CMMC? Well, honestly, that's the wrong question. Because what you're doing is you're implementing NIST SP 800-171. And you're only doing that based on specific contract clauses. So the first thing to do is to determine whether you have those contract clauses in your work. And then you have to determine whether you're handling controlled unclassified information, which is data that is produced for the government, that is covered by some kind of law, regulation, or government-wide policy. Whether you have ITAR data, which is done by the State Department and outside of CMMC in 171, but oftentimes overlaps with your covered defense information that you are protecting as controlled, and knowing the boundary between where your intellectual property is within that mix. So you always want to begin by examining your contracts. Next is you have to map where the data flows. Once you understand what is CUI in your system, you have to know where does it enter, how does it get stored, where is it processed, how do you transmit it, when's it encrypted, when's it not encrypted, which endpoints are in scope, and we call that your data flow. then you want to really start thinking about, now that you know where your data wants to go, is what steps you're going to take to protect it. So I like to do two things. I want to make a plan of action and include a list of like milestones that I'll hit when I'm doing that plan of action. And the next thing I like to do is create some kind of way to track the changes that I'm going to make when I'm meeting those milestones. And this could be like a spreadsheet, it could be a ticketing system, it could be a wiki, but you just want to really like think about and be strategic around the controls that you're going to put in place to meet the NIST SP 800-171 requirements. And when I'm making those changes, I always want to think to myself, what are the security impacts of these changes? And I'll, jot down some notes about that as well. Then start counting your stuff. There's some asset categorization in NIST SP 800-171 that is being assessed under CMMC. And so CMMC categorizes your assets, and you can learn more about those, and then you start to inventory your stuff. Because you don't know what to protect if you don't know what stuff you have. And that's really my go-to place on getting started with meeting the NIST SP 800-171 requirements that your CMMC assessment will eventually grade.